Hello. Really glad to be here. Yeah, you can do some audience response, okay? My name is Doran Schrantz. As he said, I have been doing faith-based community organizing for around 15 years. I'm originally from Iowa, from a little town in the southeast corner of Iowa called Ottumwa. He may know Ottumwa. And then I went to school in Chicago, and I actually started doing community-based organizing in Chicago, and it was from there that I was introduced to faith-based organizing as a completely unreligious person who hadn't grown up in any kind of organized religion. My parents are recovering Catholics, and that's a long story. I'll tell you that some other time. But I got involved in faith-based community organizing. I actually moved to Minnesota to work for Isaiah, which was considered at that time one of the most effective and powerful faith-based community organizing organizations in the country, and I wanted to go there to learn how to do the craft and skill of organizing faith communities to build power for social change. And so let me first figure this out. Okay, so Isaiah, really quickly, is, again, we're a faith-based community organizing organization. We have member congregations, so the way a congregation or a faith community participates in the organization is they become a member, which means they pay dues to the organization, and then the board of the organization is representative and voted on by the members, which are institutions. And we have member congregations that are formal dues-paying members all across the state of Minnesota, but then we partner with faith communities who may not be formal members. We partner with denominations, actually all across the state, and I'll tell you a little bit more who they make up. So we're also part of PICO, which is a national network of organizations like Isaiah across the country. So PICO has, I think at this point, 55 member organizations in 19 states. California is probably their largest footprint. There are 19 PICO organizations in California. And so what PICO does is bring all those organizations together, provide training and support, but then we also work on national campaigns, such as national immigration reform. The Live Free campaign is a campaign to end mass incarceration and the over-incarceration of particularly black and brown people. And we've worked on healthcare reform at a national level and are also currently exploring things about a national campaign on universal basic income and other things related to the economy. So that's PICO. So my overview today is I'm going to define a little bit what is community organizing. I'm going to talk more about how we work at the intersection of faith, race, and power, and what that has to do with health. And then I'm going to tell you a story about how we put some of that into practice concretely. This is just one tiny snapshot, and it's one story about how we're moving paid leave policies across the state of Minnesota. So first of all, this is just a little snapshot of how we think a little bit about health and kind of where to enter into the conversation. So we, as you probably can tell at this point, are not a health policy organization. We're not an organization of doctors, although doctors are involved. We're not experts or researchers. We are community members grounded in faith communities who care about our lives and would like to make our lives better. So we got into the health work partially because we became engaged in a conversation in our state about the social determinants of health and what that meant. And it was actually in our work on healthcare reform that we began to completely explode in our own minds, leaders across our organization, clergy, saying, oh, health really is everything. It's not just your access to health insurance. It's about whether or not you can live a healthy, thriving, flourishing life. And all of these things that we're experiencing, whether it's lack of a decent income or the daily racism, if you're a black and brown person, kids getting caught up in the juvenile justice system, the school to prison pipeline, not having enough money to eat, not having childcare, all these things are eroding our capacity to be healthy. And that is an incredibly powerful conversation, both in the public arena, like when we're talking to elected officials, or but also just to each other. What does it mean to create health, and what does it mean to be committed to our health? It invited us into another way of thinking about our work. So I was introduced to this little picture, and I would say that when you want to enter into a conversation from a if you're coming more from the health policy or the health professional perspective, what is this box capacity to act? So our viewpoint is that health is created by our living conditions, and our living conditions are then changed by our ability to act to change them. So if we're going to act to change our living conditions, we have to have the capacity to act. And what community organizing is essentially the building of human beings' capacity to act collectively to change the living conditions so they can have more health. So a lot of people, if you, you may see things on TV where all of a sudden a bunch of people are in the street marching for immigration reform, or you've seen pictures in a history book, or some of you were there, right? on the March on Selma, or we see things happen where all of a sudden there's a town hall meeting that's being, like it's just like an influx of people being engaged. And there's an attitude sometimes to think like that's kind of a magical thing that just unfolds. It's like the weather, like a storm came through, and all of a sudden there were 10,000 people in the street for immigration reform. Or something magical happened, and people rose up and started going door to door to figure out if their neighbors were registered to vote. Or people decided to bring all of their churches for early registration, called Souls to the Polls. That's that picture right there. We did Souls to the Polls. That's not true. It's not magic, and it's not the weather. So this capacity to act box, there's, for a lot of people, invisible work that is public work that people do to move people like a regular person, like Pastor Paul Slack, or Maria right there, or there's actually like a whole team of people that organize, like regular people, mostly immigrant leaders who organize that march, that get those people to cross the bridge, is what we call it, from seeing themselves as somebody who cannot make a difference, or somebody who is powerless, or somebody who's too busy, or somebody who has kids to raise, or somebody who feels like my voice doesn't matter, into somebody who says, no, I'm going to walk around my block and make sure all my neighbors are registered to vote. Or no, we're going to get all the pastors together and we're going to fill buses and we're going to bring people to do early registration. Or no, we have to have our voices heard and immigration reform has to be a reality in this country. That is organizing work. The work of organizers and organizations like Isaiah or PICO or countless other community organizations across this country. There are conversations at kitchen tables, in church basements, in little meeting rooms in your neighborhood, in which people go through the experience of being trained how to have the public skills to pull that off. It's work. So community organizing is a set of disciplined and strategic practices to build democratic and collective power to assure the conditions in which a community or communities can thrive. So the principal strategies of a community organizing organization like Isaiah is the first and foremost principle of it is, and this is when we go back to that box, capacity to act, is that we are developing the capacity of human beings to lead. That's before policy and it's before program. It is the point. We are developing the capacity of human beings to lead. If we do not have the capacity of human beings to lead, all the rest of it doesn't, none of the rest of it happens. So we put a huge amount of our focus and resources in an organization like Isaiah on grassroots leadership development, which is a tepid word to describe this amazing transformative process that happens for Maria or Pastor Paul or Brian Fullman or all the countless people I know who end up sitting across the table from a governor or even getting 25 people from their congregation or their community to do something together, to change something. Grassroots leadership development is an essential component of building the capacity to act. Number two, people don't act as individuals. We live in a culture of individualism in the United States. And we still sort of think even of political action as an individualistic consumer act. Like, I am going to decide to vote for X or Y, or my issue is this, what's your issue? Or the way I joke sometimes with social justice communities at the church, you treat social justice like it's a buffet and you get to pick whether you want macaroni and cheese or collard greens. And the reality is we have to decide to act collectively. And we have to act collectively as a part of organizations. So community organizing is focused on building democratic, sustainable, and community-driven organizations that are multi-issue and can work on many different things over time. And last, our theory of change is grounded in that we have to build power to make change. I was often struck, one of the first people I heard talk about the social determinants of health was Dr. Tony Aiton, who had this phrase, powerlessness is making us sick. And that was so resonant for me and the people that I work with every day. We have to have more power and voice to be able to have the capacity. That's what capacity to act is. So in order to move people to do these kinds of things, to organize, build their leadership, there's certain words that we have to reclaim. And one of those words is power. So I'm going to talk just a little bit about power. So I think my experience is that whether we're sitting in a neighborhood or in a church, definitely in a church basement, or at the pulpit, or even sometimes a lot in professional settings or all sectors, sometimes even people in government who are wielding power, people don't want to talk about power. Because we've all been taught in a lot of ways like power is bad, or it's something I'm not supposed to have, or it's something I'm supposed to hide. Well, we talk about power every day. And power is simply the ability to act. And power is something that just operates in the public sphere. So it's the realm of politics, which is another word that I feel like we need to reclaim. So we also put politics in this category of like consumer individualistic action, and we think it's about the choice between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders or any other more positive or less positive choices. Politics is not that. I think of politics as actually deriving from Aristotle's term, the polis. So what politics is, if you think about it as the body politic or the public sphere, it's the place where people enter into a public setting to make decisions together about our common life. That's what politics are. It's where we get to negotiate our interests. It's where we get to be heard. It's where we get to co-create something. And by sort of ceding all the ground about what are politics, we essentially narrow and narrow and narrow the room we have to move as human beings in that process of deciding how do we live our common life together. So we are thinking about this in a lot of ways about Isaiah. Community organizing movements are about creating a political community and expanding what we mean when we say, thank you, politics and political community when we're talking about the body politic that is the United States of America or our democracy writ large. So, political philosophy was my favorite courses in college, although I majored in English. But this is like the shortest Cliff Note version of what I learned in political philosophy at the University of Chicago. So whether we were talking about Hannah Arendt or Aristotle or Marx, or whether you read Martin Luther King, there is this notion in a lot of that we are actually political beings. So what does it mean to be a human being is somewhat a fundamental question in general, both for health, for organizing, for politics. What is the meaning of our lives? We are political beings, and what that means is they're a part of us that only really comes into existence in connection with other people and in connection with the agency of being able to be a part of decision making. That is part of what we mean when we talk about human dignity or participation or the capacity to act. I must have agency and experience what it feels like to be a part of decision-making, wielding power in public with other people around my life and my destiny. So the extent that we have the capacity to participate in public life, I would go so far to say, is partially the capacity we have to feel like full human beings. So what does that have to do with faith? So I haven't done this before in one of these settings talking about health and community organizing, but I was also asked to really talk about faith. So I often joke that at our, my job basically encompasses all the things you're not supposed to talk about at the family Thanksgiving table, which is basically religion and politics. So that's what this is religion and politics. So what does faith, what does it mean to be engaging faith communities in this conversation? And what is the theological, spiritual underpinning that connects what Aristotle is saying and what I am saying about what it means to be a human being and what it means to believe that from the perspective of faith? So instead of talking, I'm just going to invite you to release yourself a little bit into a few quotes that I would like to give you from some of my favorite, very small sample, theologians that connect this idea about politics and public life and agency to what it means to be a human being from a faith perspective. So the first thing is a theme of human dignity. Pope Francis at the World Meeting on Popular Movements. This meeting of grassroots movements is a sign. It is a great sign. For you have brought a reality that is often silenced into the presence of God, the church, and all peoples. The poor not only suffer injustice, they also struggle against it. You are not satisfied with empty promises, with alibis or excuses, nor do you wait with arms crossed for NGOs to help you, for welfare schemes or paternalistic solutions that never arrive. Or if they do, then it is with a tendency to anesthetize or to domesticate, and this is rather perilous. One senses that the poor are no longer waiting. You want to be protagonists. Radical love, public love, Martin Luther King. Power without love is reckless and abusive, and love without power is sentimental and anemic. Power at its best is love implementing the demands of justice, and justice at its best is power correcting everything that stands against love. This is my favorite Lutheran theologian, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who was killed by the Nazis in Germany. I am still discovering, right up to this moment, that it is only by living completely in this world that one learns to have faith. I mean living unreservedly in life's duties, problems, successes, and failures, experiences, and perplexities. In so doing, we throw ourselves completely into the arms of God. The call to participation in this world now. Oh, that was Bonhoeffer. My favorite Black liberation theologian, James Cone. I still regard Jesus Christ today as the chief focus of my perspective on God, but not to the exclusion of other religious perspectives. God's reality is not bound by one manifestation of the divine in Jesus, but can be found wherever people are being empowered to fight for freedom. Life-giving power for the poor and the oppressed is the primary criterion that we must use to judge the adequacy of our theology, not abstract concepts. And last, it's all possible and it's our choice. Isaiah, the Hebrew Scriptures, 43:19. Behold, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs forth. Do you not perceive it? I make a way in the wilderness and rivers in the desert. So the question becomes, when people are empowered and trained and moved around their political right to be a full human being, grounded in the spirit of this, what becomes possible to make change? If you sat in our church basements, or sat in our meetings, or sat around the table with our clergy, this is the conversation that they're having. And what's really amazing is when that happens at the state legislature and they bring this spirit, or it happens in their conversations with each other, or it happens with our allies, or it happens at the Department of Transportation, or it happens at the Department of Health, they bring something new that is possible, makes something new possible because they are grounded in this theological perspective. And this is the kind of thing they can make happen. This is Isaiah's meeting with Governor Dayton when he was first elected. We had 1,700 people after 4,000 conversations across the state about equity. We had a meeting, a 4-hour meeting with him, 1,700 people, and his entire transition team to set forth an agenda for each of his agencies about how they would advance equity in the state of Minnesota: health, transportation, the Metropolitan Council, and education. And from that place, actually, our Commissioner of Health, Ed Ellinger, was on the stage before he had been nominated, also Brenda Casilius before she had been appointed. And those relationships, that those people were actually at the center of this conversation that our leaders of faith were leading. When people are moved in this way, have the capacity and the skill, this is an event, actually a protest with the Minneapolis Public School District around the incredible numbers of suspensions for Black children, starting at the age of 4 all the way to 5th grade. Our collective demand was that there be a moratorium on suspensions for all children under 5th grade. Immediately, like no waiting, no conversation, immediately, as of right now, no more suspensions. Over there, that was the launch of our driver's licenses for immigrants campaign. That is 150 leaders from about 15 predominantly Spanish-speaking Catholic congregations who are ending in prayer after they strategized for 8 hours about how they were going to launch their campaign. And this here is a group of about 100 clergy who gathered together across denominations to launch our civic engagement campaign in 2014. So if we're going to organize faith communities, here's some things to think about. Even though faith can make us uncomfortable, you have to take it very seriously. Faith communities and institutions are complex and have their own interests. Going deep, meaning actually getting the people in the congregation engaged and aligned with their pastor and aligned with their finance council and aligned with their parish council, so they can move 100, 200, 300, 400, 500 people, is a lot of work. Unleashing faith communities is very, very powerful, and it is very potent. Isaiah has a kind of public voice in Minnesota, and PICO has a kind of public voice in this country because it is a faith voice. And because it is a faith voice, it's being backed not by spokespeople, but by hundreds of people who are actually engaged in congregations and are trained and empowered to act on their faith together. It is very potent. So these are the principles. I'm going to give you like a little quick example. Again, we are leadership development first, grounded in our faith, building democratic, sustainable, community-driven organization, and a theory of change that says we need more power if we want to win more. So we have been leading, as Isaiah, along with Children's Defense Fund and the AFL-CIO, a set of statewide campaigns to pass paid family leave policies. We have a statewide paid family leave policy, but we're also working 3 municipal campaigns to pass earned sick time, and a little bit behind that is actually fair scheduling policies so that people have more access to fair schedules if they're temporary, particularly temporary and very low wage workers in retail and fast food and things like that. So where did this come from and why are we working on it? So first and foremost, we are grounded in leadership development and the capacity of people, not that paid family leave is the right thing to do, although paid family leave is the right thing to do, and all the data suggests it, and it would be a really good thing, and everybody should have paid family leave. My point is, We don't start there with the policy. So we started with a power. So one of the things that we understood across our organization was that if we did not engage rural Minnesota communities across our state, and particular faith communities, we were not going to be able to advance any of the things that we wanted to advance. So we started, once again, with 18 months of listening and relationship building. So what that looks like is there were one-on-ones with 65 clergy. There were 10 communities engaged, regions of the state, 47 congregations, and there were probably 1,500 one-on-ones that were done amongst congregations talking to each other, and house meetings, and out of that, a theme emerged that caring for our families is a struggle in this economy. And there began the storytelling of people who had lost their homes, their jobs, their livelihood, their retirement because their husband had Alzheimer's, because their child had cancer, because their grandmother needed help. So in order to build on that theme, we created a training program that essentially began to align and organize that common story amongst those 47 congregations. So that looked like one-to-one trainings. How do they invite each other to tell their story? Week-long leadership training, which we have every year. House meetings, listening campaigns. So then, how do those people who emerged from that process why do they need an Isaiah in order to actually advance their agenda? So a lot of times what I see people do is link people together for a tactical need, like let's go get faith communities to pass paid family leave. But the question is what do they own as the faith communities themselves to advance their own long-term sustained agenda? So that's why Isaiah has to exist. So what Isaiah does is allow them to align their communities. So from Wilmer, Minnesota, to Duluth, to St. Paul, to the suburbs, there was a conversation unfolding about caring for our families and the struggle people had between work and care. We were able to bring people together to talk to each other from different perspectives and say, we want to have one campaign. Secondly, this is really important, that those people need to be able to negotiate and align with other sectors and partnerships. So our organization has helped build a small business association that supports paid family leave and sick paid policies. We've recruited small business owners from all across our congregations to be a part of something that is a separate organization, but because we are who we are and they are who they are, we're able to negotiate that relationship. We're able to negotiate with the AFL-CIO, negotiate with a Senate Majority Leader, but without an entity that people recognize, like an Isaiah, their interest of and all that energy that's been built essentially gets dissipated and or manipulated and or co-opted. So negotiation and alignment requires a power organization in order to negotiate our interests and advance something that's multi-sector and has lots of partnerships across the state with multiple interests. And then we have to amass resources. So even though we care most about building this capacity and moving bases of people, we need research, we need communications, we need policy expertise. So we've partnered with the Women's Policy Center, the Humphrey Institute, communications, but our folks are driving the agenda and they're using those resources to advance what they want to see happen. So that's why a vehicle for power is important. So these are some pictures. We have the clergy in Minneapolis, really mad because the sick leave policy was delayed, but now it's back on track. But that was part of the reason it's back on track is they kicked into action. 50 clergy went down to City Hall and took it over for a day, and that helped keep things moving forward. That's Ryan Winkler. He was the initial author of our paid family leave bill. These are just we have 2 city and 1 statewide policies moving, and it's been going on for 3 years. So just quick outcomes so far. We had legislation for paid family leave introduced and moved in 2015 that we helped write. Over 1,500 faith leaders were involved in that legislative campaign between town hall meetings, phone calling, phone banks, you know, direct actions on legislators, like, you know, writing op-eds, writing letters to the editor, all that. So engaged doesn't mean they were on a list. It means they were like making stuff happen. We partnered as part of that. One of our main partnerships was with the Minnesota Department of Health. We asked them to write a report on paid leave and health and then publicized it all over the state and gave it to every legislator and forced a hearing at the state capitol about the connection. We had we won a $250,000 statewide fiscal and state implementation policy for the paid family leave bill that we want to move. Our main partner ended up being the contractor to actually run that study, which was like amazing. The study's been completed. It's 250 pages long. I haven't read it. If you want it, it's online. But that has been the basis for a real bill that's been moving again in this legislative session. In the meantime, Dayton and all the mayors started to come out to grant their employees at least 6 weeks of paid family leave. So we started seeding at least state employees getting, and we also had Target came out saying that they would implement a paid family leave policy. So there's been this kind of momentum around paid family leave and paid sick days. As I said, the Small Business Coalition has been built. And the Senate Majority Leader and the governor have basically made paid family leave the top issue in this legislative session. It will likely not pass, but the amount of momentum was we have a Republican House, there's lots of stuff to work through, but there is also a Republican bill that's also a paid family leave bill, which, I mean, basically what's happened is everyone agrees now that we have to have paid family leave, which is not where we were 2 years ago. So our goal is to make it a top-line issue, to keep the conversation moving all the way to a vote in the Senate. Think about that in the election cycle of 2016, which our entire legislature is up for election, which is helpful. And then we hope to pass paid sick days. We're really close in Minneapolis and St. Paul, so I think that would be done by July, and then win this in 2017 is our goal. So that is it. That's my picture of the connection between community organizing, building power, provoking you about what it really means to organize faith communities, and then an example of what that looks like, one small example of what that looks like in action. So thank you.
So thank you, Nina. Waller. I'm sorry?
Doran. That was, oh, you're
No, I'm introducing the next person.
You said thank you, Doran.
Yeah, we're on the same page. Nina, I know I met Nina, she's here. Yep. So Nina's a professor at the public health program at the College of Population Health at the Health Science Center at the University of New Mexico, director of the Center of Participatory Research, and a senior fellow with the Robert Wood Johnson Center for Health Policy at UNM. And she's recently been honored with the inaugural Community Engaged Research Lecture Award from the University of New Mexico. It's wonderful to have you with us. Welcome.
Thank you so much for